He was a struggling single dad working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. She was a powerful millionaire CEO, admired and feared in the corporate world. Their paths should never have crossed. But when she noticed his quiet strength, his devotion to his child, and his dignity despite poverty, she did something that left everyone speechless. She pursued him openly, defying status, power, and expectation. What started with a simple plea, "Please don't joke with me," turned into a story that shook everyone around them. Daniel Carter's day began before dawn, just as it always did. The dim light of the early morning barely slipped through the thin curtains of his modest apartment. He rose quietly, careful not to wake his 7-year-old daughter, Emma, who was curled up beneath a patched blanket on the narrow bed they shared. The alarm clock on the chipped nightstand blinked stubbornly, reminding him that time waited for no one. He tiptoed into their tiny kitchen, where the refrigerator hummed with a tired rhythm. Inside were only a few essentials: milk, eggs, and bread. He scrambled a simple breakfast, plating Emma's portion first, because her needs always came before his own. When Emma stirred awake, rubbing her sleepy eyes, she smiled brightly at her father. "Good morning, Daddy." Her innocent greeting was the fuel that kept him alive. Daniel bent down, kissed her forehead, and set her breakfast on the small wooden table. Life had not been kind to him. Years ago, his wife had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving Daniel alone to raise Emma. He had faced the crushing weight of grief while learning how to be both father and mother. His dreams had been pushed aside, but he never complained. What mattered most was Emma's future. To provide for her, Daniel juggled 2 jobs. By day, he worked at a warehouse, hauling heavy crates and managing shipments for meager pay. By night, he took on extra shifts as a server at events, wearing a crisp but inexpensive uniform and blending into the background of elegant gatherings. His apartment was small, his bank account nearly empty, but his heart overflowed with love for Emma. That love was his greatest wealth. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, life looked very different. Victoria Hale, one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, stood before a floor-to-ceiling window in her penthouse suite. The city skyline sparkled beneath her, skyscrapers reaching upward like monuments to ambition. She was the woman who had built an empire from the ground up, who commanded boardrooms with a single glance, and whose name was spoken with reverence in business circles. She was elegance personified. Her tailored suits, her poised demeanor, and her sharp intellect made her untouchable in the eyes of many. Yet behind that commanding presence was a loneliness that money could not erase. Each evening, she returned to an empty home. Her victories were celebrated with champagne and applause, but when the night grew quiet, she felt only the echo of silence. The world saw her as untouchable. But she longed for something real, something that could not be bought with wealth or influence. 2 worlds. One of modest sacrifice, the other of dazzling success. Fate, however, was about to weave their lives together in ways neither could have imagined. The evening air was cool as Daniel stepped into the grand ballroom of Victoria Hale's company headquarters. He adjusted the collar of his modest uniform nervously. The chandeliers above cast sparkling light across the polished floors, reflecting off crystal glasses and tailored suits. The room buzzed with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of silverware. For Daniel, this world was foreign. Wealth and privilege surrounded him in every direction. Men and women in designer suits and elegant gowns moved with confidence, their conversations filled with business jargon and subtle power plays. He felt small, almost invisible, as he carried trays of appetizers and cocktails to each table. Despite the discomfort, Daniel kept his composure. He had learned long ago to be humble yet confident, to do his work with quiet diligence. Every tray balanced, every step calculated. One slip, he knew, could invite embarrassment, but failure was never an option. Victoria Hale, meanwhile, had just stepped onto the ballroom floor, greeting influential guests with a poised smile. Her eyes scanned the crowd, always observing, always calculating. Business was her domain, but tonight, a subtle sense of restlessness tugged at her. She had mastered deals, acquisitions, and negotiations, but something essential felt absent. And then she noticed him. Daniel had just prevented a minor disaster. Another server had tripped, sending a tray of champagne glasses tilting dangerously. Daniel's quick reflexes saved the moment. With a swift adjustment of his hands, not only did he prevent the glasses from shattering, but he also apologized to the startled guest, bowing politely. Victoria watched in quiet fascination. The man moved with precision, yet there was something else, in integrity in his gestures, a respect for others even in chaos. She had seen many men in her life, powerful and polished, yet none had commanded her attention in this way. When the event briefly slowed, she approached him. "You handled that very well," she said, her voice smooth but genuinely warm. Daniel's heart skipped. He looked up at her, startled. "Oh, thank you, ma'am," he replied, careful not to overstep, careful not to draw too much attention to himself. "I just did what I could." There was humility in his voice, but also a quiet strength. Victoria noted it immediately. She smiled faintly. "It is rare to see someone so composed under pressure," she said. Daniel's cheeks flushed, a mixture of embarrassment and awe. Here was the CEO of the company, speaking to him as if he mattered. He bowed his head slightly. "Thank you, ma'am, that means a lot coming from you." The brief conversation ended, yet it lingered in both of their minds. For Daniel, it was a fleeting moment of recognition in a life otherwise filled with struggle and toil. For Victoria, it was a sparking, unexpected curiosity about a man whose dignity and kindness stood out amidst a room full of wealth and pretense. Little did they know, this was the first of many encounters that would gradually draw them closer. A single, polite exchange had planted the seeds of something far greater, a connection that neither wealth nor poverty could define. One that would challenge expectations, gossip, and the very boundaries of their worlds. As the gala continued, Daniel returned to his duties, carrying trays with the same quiet diligence, unaware that someone powerful had taken note of him. Victoria, on the other hand, lingered at the edge of the ballroom, watching him with interest, sensing that there was more to this man than met the eye. Days passed, yet the memory of Daniel Carter lingered in Victoria Hale's mind. She had seen many people in her life, powerful, polished, ambitious, but none had left such a distinct impression. There was something in his humility, in the quiet dignity he carried, despite the weight of hardship, that fascinated her. Unlike the men who surrounded her in the boardroom, Daniel was not trying to impress her or anyone else. He was simply himself, rarity that drew her attention and admiration. Their paths crossed again, this time, in less formal circumstances. Daniel had taken a shift in the company cafeteria, where Victoria occasionally dined in private, away from the formalities of board meetings. She arrived for lunch, a purposeful presence amid the modest bustle of workers and employees. As she entered, Daniel greeted the customers politely, his movements efficient but calm. Victoria observed him discreetly. There was a quiet composure in the way he moved, a grace in his modesty, and a kindness that seemed to radiate naturally. When he noticed her watching, he bowed slightly. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said. Victoria smiled. "Good afternoon, Daniel. May I join you?" Daniel blinked, unsure if she was serious. "Oh, of course," he stammered, guiding her to a nearby table. He was polite, but his nervousness was evident. The cafeteria's chatter seemed to fade into the background as the two of them spoke. Over the course of several encounters, Victoria began to learn more about him. She discovered that he was a single father to a bright-spirited daughter named Emma. The stories he shared of her laughter, mischief, and small victories painted a picture of a family built on love and devotion rather than wealth. She noticed his unwavering patience. Even when faced with difficult customers or the pressure of his multiple jobs, she realized that his character was unshakable. He did not complain about his hardships, nor did he seek sympathy. He carried himself with quiet resilience that few possessed. Victoria began seeking opportunities to see him again. Sometimes it was a casual smile in the cafeteria, sometimes a brief conversation during company events. To those around her, it was unusual. Executives whispered in corridors, "Why is the CEO so interested in a low-level worker?" Yet Victoria paid no mind to the murmurs. Daniel, however, was unaware of the growing attention. To him, Victoria's interest was confusing and intimidating. He respected her immensely, but he could not imagine someone of her status caring for someone like him. He questioned her motives silently, wondering if it was a jest, a fleeting amusement that would disappear when she returned to her powerful world. Meanwhile, Victoria observed the little things that revealed his heart. How he treated the cafeteria staff with respect, never acting superior despite the class differences. How he spoke of Emma with pride, yet with modesty, never boasting about his role as her father. How his laughter, rare and unguarded, carried warmth that no wealth could replicate. Each encounter strengthened her curiosity, her admiration, and, quietly, her feelings. She realized that the connection she felt was not superficial, it was rooted in values, character, and a human warmth she had never experienced in her life of privilege. Their interactions remained polite, yet charged with subtle tension. Daniel was unaware of how deeply Victoria's gaze followed him, or how much she thought of him in quiet moments away from the public eye. He continued to serve, to work, and to care for Emma, his world simple yet honest. While Victoria's thoughts grew increasingly occupied with the man who embodied everything she secretly longed for: authenticity, integrity, and unwavering devotion. And in this slow, deliberate way, the first threads of their unlikely bond began to weave themselves together. A single glance, a short conversation, a shared smile, these small moments became the foundation for a relationship that would defy expectations, challenge norms, and eventually capture the attention of everyone around them. It was a crisp morning when Victoria Hale made a decision that would change both their lives. No longer content to admire Daniel from afar or hide behind polite conversations, she resolved to be direct. She would approach him openly, without pretense, without the safety of corporate distance. Daniel was finishing his shift in the company cafeteria when she appeared at the entrance. The murmur of lunch-hour chatter fell into an almost imperceptible hush as employees noticed the CEO herself entering the modest space. All eyes turned to the unlikely scene. Victoria Hale, radiant and poised, approaching a man dressed in the simple uniform of a server. Daniel froze mid-step, tray in hand. His heart pounded, and for a moment, he could not speak. He had seen her at galas, in boardrooms, and occasionally in passing. He had never expected her to approach him here, in this small, ordinary place. "Good afternoon, Daniel," Victoria said, her voice warm but confident. "May I join you for a moment?" Daniel blinked, swallowing hard. "Oh, of course, ma'am." He guided her to a small corner table, hands trembling ever so slightly. As they sat, Victoria's gaze was steady. "Daniel," she began, choosing her words carefully, "I have noticed you. I have noticed the way you care for your daughter, the way you carry yourself with dignity, and the way you treat others with respect. It is rare." Daniel's throat tightened. He had worked hard all his life, yet praise from someone like her was overwhelming. He opened his mouth to respond, but his mind struggled to find words suitable for such a moment. Finally, he blurted, his voice laced with disbelief and embarrassment, "People, please, do not joke with me." Victoria leaned slightly forward, her eyes locking with his. "I am not joking, Daniel," she said firmly. "I am serious. What I see in you is real, and it matters more than wealth, status, or appearances. I admire you, deeply." The cafeteria seemed to vanish around them. Daniel's pulse raced, a mixture of awe, fear, and uncertainty. He could not comprehend how someone of Victoria's stature could genuinely see value in him. A man who had struggled his entire life to make ends meet. Whispers rippled among the employees. Some exchanged astonished glances, others smirked with disbelief. Gossip traveled quickly in such a setting. The CEO, pursuing a cafeteria worker, was the talk of the floor, yet Victoria remained undeterred. She would not allow the opinions of others to dictate her actions. Daniel, on the other hand, wrestled with doubt. His life had been defined by struggle and humility. He was a man of principle, but he was also painfully aware of the societal and financial gap between him and Victoria. How could someone so powerful and successful genuinely desire him? The thought seemed impossible, yet Victoria's sincerity was undeniable. Over the following days, she continued to find opportunities to see him. A casual conversation in the office corridor, offering advice or a small compliment on his work ethic. Invitations to attend corporate events as a guest, a subtle way of including him in her world. Small acts of kindness, such as leaving a note for him to share with Emma, or providing encouragement when she noticed him struggling with exhaustion. With each encounter, the world around them seemed to grow smaller. Daniel could no longer dismiss Victoria's attention as a joke or pretense. He began to see her admiration as genuine, though fear and insecurity still clouded his heart. Victoria, meanwhile, grew more determined. She ignored the whispers, the sideways glances, and the judgments of her colleagues. To her, Daniel's worth was not defined by money or social standing. His resilience, kindness, and devotion to Emma were qualities she valued far above any material measure. The bold pursuit had begun. What started as curiosity and admiration had transformed into a deliberate effort to bridge the worlds that society had long insisted must remain separate. And though Daniel could not yet fully trust the sincerity of her interest, he could not deny the stirring hope she had. Ignited within him a hope that perhaps for the first time, love and respect could transcend wealth, status, and expectation. Daniel Carter's life had always been defined by responsibility, sacrifice, and quiet endurance. Yet, as Victoria Hale's attention grew more deliberate and open, he found himself confronting feelings he had never expected. He was flattered, yes, and secretly drawn to her warmth and strength, but he was also overwhelmed by insecurity. How could someone like her care about someone like me? He wondered late one evening, sitting at the kitchen table after a long shift. Emma slept peacefully in her room, unaware of her father's internal turmoil. Daniel stared at his worn hands, calloused from years of labor, and his modest apartment, and felt the sharp sting of left out. He feared humiliation not only for himself but for Emma. What if people laughed at them for daring to imagine a life together? What if Victoria's interest was fleeting, a passing fancy that would disappear once the world reminded her of the difference in their stations? Meanwhile, Victoria faced pressures of her own, the corporate world that revered her for power. And acumen suddenly became critical when whispers of her pursuit of a low-level employee began circulating. Board members expressed concern in private meetings. A CEO of your stature cannot be seen publicly with someone so beneath your position, one executive said cautiously. Friends and family echoed similar sentiments. Victoria, be careful, her sister advised. It could damage your reputation. People will talk. Yet she was undeterred. The more she observed Daniel, the more she recognized a truth that money, influence, and image had never given her. Character and integrity matter more than status. Even Emma, the little girl at the heart of Daniel's life, played a role in softening the barriers between worlds. The first time Victoria met her, it was a casual encounter in a park while Victoria accompanied Daniel to pick up groceries. Emma, unafraid and inquisitive, ran up to Victoria with a wide smile. "Hello," she exclaimed, holding out her small hand. "Are you my daddy's friend?" Victoria crouched to Emma's level, smiling warmly. "I hope I can be," she said gently. She knelt and played along, showing Emma how to skip stones across a small puddle in the park. Daniel watched from a distance, a mixture of awe and nervousness. Emma's acceptance of Victoria gave him courage, but his doubts remained. He worried about the scrutiny, the whispers, and the potential for heartache. He had been alone for so long, navigating life's hardships without external support, that the idea of opening his heart to someone so different was terrifying. Victoria, too, faced moments of doubt, though of a different nature. Could she truly bridge the gap between her world of privilege and Daniel's life of struggle? Could she weather the judgment of society, colleagues, and friends? Yet every small interaction, every shared smile, every moment she saw Daniel's love for Emma, reaffirmed her conviction. It was in these moments of tension, Daniel's insecurity, Victoria's societal pressures, and Emma's innocent curiosity, that the foundation of their bond began to solidify. Both Daniel and Victoria were challenged to confront fears, prejudices, and assumptions. And in doing so, they began to understand that love was not about wealth, appearances, or approval. It was about connection, trust, and the courage to believe in something greater than societal expectation. Each encounter, each hesitation, and each small act of kindness moved them closer. Victoria's pursuit was no longer a curiosity, was deliberate and heartfelt. Daniel's resistance was no longer denial, it was the cautious unfolding of a heart unsure, yet yearning for connection. And through Emma's laughter, her playful questions, and her unwavering innocence, the barriers between worlds began to crumble, setting the stage for a public moment that would astonish everyone around them. The company's annual gala was a spectacle of elegance and prestige. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen stars from the high ceiling, casting light on polished floors and sharply dressed executives. Champagne flowed freely, servers moved gracefully between guests, and the hum of conversation filled the grand hall. Daniel Carter, exhausted from a long day, had been assigned to work the event as a server once again. His uniform was crisp, his movements careful, but a sense of tension lingered in his chest. The murmurs of employees reached him even before he stepped into the room. "Did you hear? The CEO is bringing Daniel to the gala." Openly he paused, gripping a tray of glasses. For weeks whispers about him and Victoria had circulated, but he had managed to ignore them. Tonight, however, it would no longer be possible. Victoria Hale entered the hall, radiating confidence and grace. Eyes naturally turned toward her, but hers were fixed on Daniel. She walked directly to him, her presence commanding yet warm. "Daniel," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Would you walk with me?" He froze, unsure of what to say. His mind raced. What would the guests think? What would people say about a millionaire CEO accompanying a cafeteria worker at a high-profile event? Yet, something in her gaze silenced his fear. She was serious. She was sincere. As they walked together, the room went silent. Conversations faltered as the crowd processed the unexpected sight. Whispers became audible. "Is that the CEO is with him? Why would she?" Victoria turned to him and smiled. "Do not be afraid, Daniel. What I see in you is real. Your character, your kindness, your love for Emma, these are worth far more than any title or wealth. I admire you." Daniel's heart pounded. The words, so genuine and heartfelt, cut through the haze of self-doubt and insecurity that had plagued him for years. He felt something he had not dared to feel in a long time: hope. The crowd watched, some in shock, others in admiration. Victoria had made a bold, public declaration of her feelings, defying societal expectations and corporate norms. Daniel, for the first time, saw himself through her eyes, not as a poor single father, not as a man beneath her world, but as someone worthy of love, respect, and admiration. A wave of courage surged within him. He straightened, lifted his head, and met her gaze. "Victoria." His voice trembled, but he did not falter. "I never imagined. I never thought someone like you could see me like this." Victoria reached out and gently touched his arm. "I see you, Daniel. I have always seen you." In that moment, the room seemed to disappear. It was no longer about wealth, status, or societal judgment. It was about two hearts recognizing each other across a divide that the world had insisted was insurmountable. The turning point had arrived. Daniel's resistance, Victoria's bold pursuit, and Emma's innocent bond had all converged to create a moment that neither would ever forget. The barriers between them were broken, replaced with understanding, admiration, and the possibility of a future neither had dared to imagine before. For the first time in his life, Daniel allowed himself to believe that love could exist beyond circumstance. For Victoria, It was a revelation that wealth and power could never replace the joy of genuine human connection. And for Emma, it was the beginning of a family that, though unconventional, was built on trust, respect, and unconditional love. In the days following the gala, Daniel Carter began to notice a change not only in how others perceived him, but in how he perceived himself. Victoria's public acknowledgement had shifted something deep within his heart. No longer did he see himself as merely a struggling single father living on the edge of society. He was someone worthy of love, respect, and happiness. The small apartment where he lived with Emma was still modest, still filled with the same worn furniture and second-hand possessions. Yet, for the first time, it felt like a place where joy could grow. Daniel found himself smiling more, walking taller, speaking with a newfound confidence, and allowing himself moments of hope he had once considered impossible. Victoria, for her part, grew closer to both Daniel and Emma. She began visiting their home in the evenings, helping with homework, reading stories, and sharing laughter that had long been absent from her life. Emma adored her immediately, embracing her as a guiding figure, someone who complemented the love she already had for her father. In the corporate world, the reactions were varied. Some colleagues whispered skeptically, unable to reconcile the CEO's choice with their own notions of social hierarchy. Others, however, were inspired, witnessing a love and respect that transcended societal expectations. The story of Daniel and Victoria became an unspoken lesson in character, kindness, and courage. Victoria offered Daniel a position within her company not as charity, but in recognition of his integrity, work ethic, and leadership potential. Daniel hesitated, humbled and cautious, but eventually accepted, eager to provide more stability for Emma and to embrace the opportunities that life had now opened for him. Together, the three of them began creating a life that blended both worlds. Wealth and influence were no longer barriers, they were tools used to enhance their happiness, not define it. Weekends were spent in laughter-filled parks, evenings in shared meals, and quiet nights telling stories before Emma fell asleep. Daniel's growth was profound. He learned that humility and diligence could coexist with confidence and self-worth. Victoria discovered that love was not measured by luxury or status, but by sincerity, trust, and devotion. And Emma, the heart of their little family, learned that families were not defined by wealth or appearances, but by the depth of love and care shared between those who truly valued one another. As the months passed, their bond deepened, grounded in mutual respect and genuine affection. Friends and colleagues who had once doubted them began to acknowledge the strength of their connection. What had started as a bold pursuit had matured into a partnership rooted in understanding, patience, and shared values. In a quiet moment, Daniel reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the struggles, the long nights, the doubts, and the fears. And he realized that each hardship had been a step toward this moment, toward a family built not on circumstance, but on love. Victoria, observing Daniel and Emma from across the room one evening, felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Her empire had brought her recognition and respect, yet it was in this modest apartment, amidst laughter, shared meals, and quiet companionship, that she had found the richness she had always craved. The story concluded not with grand gestures or material wealth, but with the simple, enduring truth that genuine connection, courage, and unwavering love could bridge any divide. Together, Daniel, Emma, and Victoria had created a life that no one could have predicted, yet it was perfect in every sense. Their journey was a testament to the power of heart over status, devotion over appearances, and courage over fear. And in that modest apartment filled with laughter, warmth, and hope, they lived each day embracing a truth that would guide them forever. Love sees worth where the world sees none, and courage transforms lives in ways even the richest cannot imagine.